The sun had not yet cleared the eastern ridge when the call came through, a sharp crackle on the old radio that jolted Caleb Hensley from the stillness of his morning. He had been sipping coffee on the porch of the ranger station, watching mist settle into the gullies below, when the dispatcher's voice, tight and uncharacteristically urgent, broke the quiet. Possible injured wildlife in Sector 9. Equine, likely a Mustang. The coordinates were deep in the reserve, far from any trail or human traffic. Caleb set the mug down without finishing it. He knew those hills like the lines on his own hands, but Sector 9 always carried a certain weight. The terrain there was harsh. Tight ravines, slick boulder runs, and thick undergrowth that swallowed sound. It was also where he had lost 1 year ago, an elk tangled in fencing, his hesitation costing minutes that couldn't be spared. The image of its eyes, wild and pleading, had been with him every day since. This time, there would be no pause. Isla Moreno was already by the Jeep when he stepped outside, hair pulled back, gear bag slung across her shoulder. She was new to the job, still fresh enough to believe the worst could be avoided with enough willpower and quick thinking. Caleb had long since learned that nature didn't barter. Still, he was glad for her presence. The engine turned over with a familiar growl, and they were off, tires spitting gravel as the road narrowed into a single lane of dirt. They didn't speak much on the way. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic clatter of loose gear filled the silence. Through the windshield, the reserve stretched wide and untamed, rolling grasslands giving way to shadowed forest, the air holding that faint metallic scent that came before rain. Caleb kept his eyes scanning the tree lines, noting every flicker of movement, every ripple in the brush. At the trailhead, they abandoned the Jeep for foot travel. The air grew cooler under the canopy, the ground damp with last night's rain. Caleb led the way, boots finding the narrowest gaps between roots, Isla close behind. Half a mile in, he stopped abruptly, crouching low. In the mud ahead, something had left a broad, dragging mark, a groove flanked by disturbed soil. Hoof prints, yes, but only two leading in, shallow and erratic, as though the animal had been stumbling. Beside them, something heavier had pressed a winding track into the earth, wide and unbroken. Isla saw it too. "Snake," she whispered. Caleb nodded once, scanning the dense brush ahead. In this region, most were harmless, but a track that size narrowed the list of something they didn't want to meet unprepared. The sound reached them before the sight. A dry, muscular rustle, low to the ground but heavy with weight. Caleb moved forward, every step deliberate, until the trees opened into a small clearing mottled with pale light. And there it was. The Mustang mare lay half on her side, her chest heaving in shallow bursts. A massive python had coiled itself around her middle, its thick body glistening with moisture, muscles rippling each time it tightened. The mare's eyes rolled, showing white, her nostrils flaring in panic. Her legs kicked weakly, scraping against the ground, but the snake's grip only seemed to anchor deeper. For a moment, the world contracted to the scene before him. Caleb's pulse hammered in his ears, his mind cataloging every possible approach. They were too far from backup, and even if help left now, it would be an hour before anyone arrived. The python's head rested near the mare's withers, tongue flicking in and out with lazy precision, unhurried in its hold. Isla shifted beside him, fingers tightening around the handle of her knife. "We have to do something," she said, her voice taut. Caleb's gaze swept the perimeter. There was no clear shot to spook the snake without risking the mare. They could try distracting it, forcing it to loosen its coils, but that would mean stepping directly into its strike range. His mind played through scenarios with brutal speed, each one ending with a margin for failure he couldn't accept. The mare's breathing hitched, her body sagging slightly in the coils. Caleb took a step forward, ready to risk the close quarters. And then, a sharp, ringing snort split the air, so sudden it froze them both in place. The sound carried authority, not panic. From the ridgeline to their left, a dark shape stood framed against the sky, the morning wind tugging at its mane. The stallion's coat was black as wet stone, muscles tense beneath the sheen, ears fixed on the clearing below. Caleb's breath caught. Wild stallions did not approach humans. Not like this, not without reason. And yet the animal's focus was absolute. Not on them, but on the python. His stance was rigid, poised on the cusp of motion, as if the descent down the ridge was inevitable and only waiting for some silent command from within. The mare's eyes flicked upward toward him, a flicker of recognition or hope passing through her gaze. Caleb could not tell, but in that suspended heartbeat, with the python's coils tightening and the stallion's shadow stretching down toward them, the air seemed to sharpen. Something was about to give way. The stallion began his descent without hesitation, each step a measured press of muscle and will. Pebbles skittered ahead of him, rattling down the slope, but his eyes never left the tangle of snake and mare below. His nostrils flared, pulling in the scent of danger, the way a soldier sizes the field before the first move. Caleb felt a change in the air, an unspoken shift from helpless witness to unfolding contest. Isla's grip on her knife tightened, but she didn't move. The stallion's approach carried a precision that made her hold her breath, as though one misplaced sound might fracture whatever instinct was guiding him. Caleb, too, stayed still, every muscle coiled, his gaze flicking between predator and rescuer. The python sensed movement and adjusted, shifting a fraction of its bulk, so the coils squeezed higher along the mare's rib cage. The mare's eyes rolled again, panic flashing like lightning. Her legs thrashed weakly, hooves scoring shallow grooves in the earth. The stallion closed the last yard between them, stepping into the clearing as though he owned it. Then he struck, not with a headlong charge, but with calculated force. His forelegs snapped forward, hoofs slamming into the ground inches from the snake's head. Dust erupted. The python's head lifted, tongue flicking faster now, its body pausing just enough to loosen its grip by a breath. Caleb caught that flicker of opportunity. "Noise!" he whispered to Isla, already reaching for a chunk of loose rock at his feet. She understood, darting sideways to skirt the edge of the clearing, her boots silent on the damp ground. When she was far enough to draw the python's attention from a different angle, she clanged her knife hard against a stone outcrop. The sharp metallic ring split the quiet like a bell. The python's head swung toward her, just enough to break its single-minded hold. The stallion moved again, this time rearing onto his hind legs. His hooves cut the air and came down in a jarring double strike against the snake's midsection. The sound was like a heavy branch snapping, followed by a violent undulation of scaled muscle. The mare gasped, her chest expanding for the first time in long moments. Caleb edged forward, heart pounding with a rhythm he could feel in his teeth. He knew better than to get too close without the snake's head pinned or distracted, but the stallion's relentless precision was creating slivers of opening that hadn't existed before. Each strike was placed to startle and disrupt rather than merely enrage, buying seconds that Caleb intended to use. The python lashed suddenly, a blur of muscle toward the stallion's foreleg. The stallion pivoted sharply, the strike missing by inches, and kicked out with his hind legs. The impact reverberated through the ground beneath Caleb's boots. Isla called out sharply, "Now!" Caleb lunged in, gloved hands gripping the python's body just behind the coils. The heat and strength of it were immediate, almost unnatural. He wrenched upward, forcing the coils to shift. The snake resisted, muscles locking tight. But the stallion pressed in, his bulk driving against the predator's length. Between man and horse, the tension began to break. The mare's sides expanded again, a shudder rolling through her as air returned in ragged pulls. Caleb's fingers screamed from the strain, but he didn't let go. Inch by inch, the coils loosened. The python twisted, tail lashing against Caleb's hip hard enough to stagger him, but before it could reorient, the stallion's forehoof came down again, closer this time, and the snake flinched. With a final heave, Caleb pulled the last loop clear of the mare's body. The python's focus shifted entirely to escape, its head sweeping low toward the underbrush. In one fluid motion, it slid away, scales rippling in a muscular wave until the forest swallowed it whole. Silence settled, broken only by the harsh, uneven breaths of the three who remained. The mare collapsed onto her side, trembling but alive. Caleb stepped back, chest heaving, sweat stinging his eyes. Isla crouched near the edge, knife still in hand, watching the shadows in case the snake returned. The stallion did not leave. He stood over the mare, his head lowered, breath washing over her sweat-darkened coat. His ears flicked toward every sound, the sentry between her and the world. Caleb met his gaze across the small space between them. A flicker of something passing there, gratitude, maybe, or the simple acknowledgement of two creatures who had chosen the same fight. The moment held, quiet and unbroken, until a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the ridges, pulling their eyes toward the horizon. Something told Caleb that the storm wasn't the only thing still coming. The first drops of rain fell cool and sparse, speckling the dust where the python had vanished. Caleb knelt beside the mare, his hands moving over her flank with practiced efficiency. Beneath the sheen of sweat, her muscles quivered in uneven pulses, the deep imprint of the coils still visible as dark bands across her hide. Her breathing came in shallow bursts, each one edged with pain but steadier than before. Isla held a canteen to her muzzle, tilting it just enough of the water to touch her lips. The mare's tongue flicked hesitantly, then drank. The stallion stood only a step away, his body angled so he blocked their work from the tree line. His ears rotated constantly, catching the faintest shifts in the brush. His coat was streaked with damp dust, a fresh scrape visible along his shoulder where the python had struck. Caleb's eyes traced the injury, a line of raw skin already reddening. But the stallion seemed unconcerned. His focus was entirely on the mare. "Think she's got a chance?" Isla asked quietly. Caleb didn't look up. "If she can stand soon, yes. If not—" He let the rest hang, unwilling to voice the outcome. He had seen animals give up before their bodies failed. Survival was as much will as it was flesh. The rain thickened, a curtain of silver threads between them and the ridge. Caleb knew it would make the ground slick, the paths harder to navigate if they had to move her. The thought of carrying a half-ton animal through mud and stone was almost laughable, yet leaving her was not an option. He scanned the clearing for anything to improvise, fallen branches for a travois, rope from his pack. A low sound drew his attention back. The stallion had lowered his head to the mare's neck, exhaling in slow, measured bursts. She responded with a faint twitch of her ears, her eyes half-lidded but tracking his presence. It was not a gesture of dominance or urgency. It was steadiness, a reminder that she was not alone. Caleb saw the shift. The mare's breathing deepened. Her legs tensed as though remembering their purpose. He rose, stepping back to give her space. Islam moved too, crouched at the side, ready to steady her as she faltered. With a sharp, deliberate snore from the stallion, the mare rolled her shoulders forward and pushed against the earth. Her hooves scraped, slipped, then found purchase. Slowly, almost grudgingly, she stood. The relief that hit Caleb was quiet but powerful, settling into his chest like warmth against the cold drizzle. Standing meant blood was moving, lungs expanding, the will to try still intact. He didn't voice his thoughts, but Isla caught the faint curve of his mouth and allowed herself the same breath of hope. Thunder boomed closer now, a rolling growl that vibrated through the sodden ground. The stallion's head lifted toward it, ears stiffening, then swiveling toward the open ridge where he had first appeared. Somewhere out there, beyond sight, his herd might be waiting, yet he didn't move to leave. Caleb stepped nearer, slow enough not to startle him. The stallion's gaze met his, unwavering, as if measuring whether these humans could be trusted any further. Caleb didn't reach out. Bridges with the wild were built on distance, not intrusion. Instead, he nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of shared purpose. Isla secured the mare's side with a loose rope halter, not control her, but a guide if needed. The stallion shifted closer, almost brushing Caleb's shoulder in the process. It was a fleeting contact, but enough to leave the smell of rain-damp hide lingering in Caleb's senses. A sharp crack in the distance snapped every head toward the trees. Not thunder this time, with breaking under weight. Caleb's instincts flared. The python was unlikely to return so soon, but the reserve held other threats. The stallion moved first, stepping in front of the mare again, muscles tight under his slick coat. The message was wordless but clear. Whatever approach would meet him before it reached her. The brush at the clearing's edge stirred once, twice, then stilled. Caleb kept his hand near the multi-tool on his belt, his breath shallow as the rain pattered harder. Somewhere beyond that wall of green, something was waiting, and whether it was predator or chance encounter, The fragile safety they had just won was about to be tested again. The movement came again, sharper this time, a deliberate parting of wet leaves. Caleb's breath slowed, ears straining. The stallion stayed fixed between the mare and the sound, every line of him coiled in readiness. Isla's fingers brushed the handle of her knife, her weight shifting to the balls of her feet. For a long moment, the rain filled the space where fear might have been. Then, a small shape broke the green, a mule deer, its ears flicking at the scent of them. It froze at the sight of the stallion, then bounded away into the downpour, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The release of tension was almost physical. Caleb let out a breath, but the stallion didn't relax until the rustle of the deer's retreat had faded entirely. Only then did he step back, allowing the mare a fraction more space to stand without his shadow covering her. She lowered her head to graze on the rain-wet grass, each bite slow, deliberate. Caleb studied her movements, the way her weight shifted, the subtle tremor still in her left hind leg. She would recover, he thought, if she could avoid another shock before regaining full strength. The storm wasn't helping. Rain now pooled in shallow depressions, turning the clearing into a slick, uneven patchwork of mud. The quickest path out was a ridge, but that was a climb the mare wouldn't manage in her current state. They would need to take the lower trail along the stream bed, slower but more forgiving on her legs. Isla seemed to have read his mind. If we keep her moving, even at a crawl, she'll warm up and we can get her closer to shelter before nightfall. He nodded. We move when she's ready, not before. His gaze flicked to the stallion, who had stepped to the edge of the clearing, scanning the treeline again. Caleb wondered if the other Mustangs had drifted farther in his absence, or they lingered just beyond human sight. Either way, this stallion had chosen to stay. Minutes passed with only the patter of rain and the steady sound of the mare's chewing. Caleb shifted his weight, mindful of the ache creeping into his shoulders. His eyes kept finding the scrape along the stallion's flank, raw against the black coat. It was a badge of the fight they had both just survived. When the mare lifted her head, ears pricked, he saw the readiness in her stance. Caleb stepped forward, rope in hand, letting her see his approach. She didn't flinch, though her eyes tracked him closely. The stallion moved parallel to them, keeping just enough distance to signal. He wasn't yielding guardianship, but wasn't opposing their guidance either. They started toward the stream bed, the mare's gait uneven but determined. Caleb walked at her shoulder, feeling the rope's light tension, every step measured to her pace. Isla followed at the rear, scanning the slope for any sign of returning danger. The stallion shadowed them on the higher ground to the right, a silent escort. The trail narrowed, forcing them single file where the stream curved between moss-slick rocks. Twice the mare stumbled, and both times the stallion shifted down toward her, a subtle push of presence that seemed to steady her. Caleb caught in the corner of his eye, a wordless intervention, as if the animal understood that encouragement was sometimes a difference between stopping and going on. By the time they reached a sheltered bend where the stream pooled deep and still, the rain had softened to a fine mist. Caleb led the mare to the edge so she could drink. Her head dipped low, ripples breaking against her muzzle. The stallion drank beside her, both of them framed in the dim, filtered light under the canopy. Caleb stood back, letting the quiet settle. His boots were soaked, his shoulders sore, but something in his chest had eased. The failure that had haunted him for years felt lighter, not gone, but tempered by this shared victory, by the sight of a wild stallion refusing to abandon his own. When the mare had her fill, she stepped back from the water, sides rising and falling in steady rhythm. The stallion glanced toward the distant ridge, ears catching some sound the humans couldn't hear. Caleb knew what it meant. The pull of the herd was returning. Yet still, the stallion lingered. Only when the path ahead was clear and the mare stood balanced on her feet did he turn. His eyes met Caleb's for the briefest instant, something like recognition passing there. Then he moved up the slope, each step sure and unhurried, until the mist and the trees claimed him. The mare watched him disappear, then lowered her head again, calm for the first time since they'd found her. Caleb let his hand rest lightly on her neck, feeling the steady thrum of life beneath his palm, and knew the day had given back more than it had taken.